Alright, what is up YouTube? It's K-Rod here. Back with a good video for today before I get back to my boring life at work and IT studies. I'm always doing that when I get back home from work, but whenever I'm home, I relax, try to recuperate my body, go back to the hellhole of work, and then I'll be able to come back and then I relax more. So really nothing serious. Yesterday was a bit of a crappy day. I had to do some extra work that didn't make any sense that somebody else, should have gotten completed, and they decided not to load up their stuff or get the work completed. So the management tried to force it on me, and then here I am now, fast forward, trying to, regain my, my energy. But either way, everything's fine. I'll probably even just like leave like my job honestly and just go somewhere else just to have good steady hours, because showing up at like midnight leading up until like 9 a.m. If not, I like to leave by 8:30. That really doesn't make any sense for me to like be there all the time, but I like to clock in early. But either way, that's a different story. Let's just talk about what I want to talk about. um I'm gonna talk about Jake Paul. I'm gonna pose the question of, is Jake Paul helping the sport of boxing? And I want to say yes, and I want to kind of say no, but in retrospect, I want to say yes. Jake Paul is helping the sport of boxing. For those of you that may not know, Jake Paul, he is a YouTuber, and he is obviously in the sport of boxing for prize fighting. He's not there for the sport of boxing to become a world champion, prove legacy over, money and fame. I think he's obviously just doing that just for the sake of trying to get the most money out of the sport. More so, he's a clout chaser. But let's just maybe expand the question even bigger. Are YouTubers helping the sport of boxing? And this question usually gets asked by a lot of people. But why would anybody think that social media stars would somehow make a difference by coming into the boxing game? And my whole spiel about it, or my whole response to it, is no. I don't think social media stars are helping the sport of boxing. Number one, it's only a temporary benefit for the social media stars. See, now let's just kind of explore this issue. With all the time that I have left, let's see what time I got. Yeah, 10:34. I can ramble for a bit, but basically, when we talk about anybody in the sport of boxing, we already know like the big names. We have the Floyd Mayweathers, we have the Sugar Ray Leonards, we have the Tommy the Hitman Hearns. We already have like a backstory of every fighter that has come into the game and did everything in their rightful power so to try to be the best. But the issue behind it is simply, what is the cost benefit analysis of it? And the problem that I have with the sport of boxing is simply the cost benefit analysis, or the cost benefit variable, that is not being supplied with a massive supply and demand of having the best fight the best. And when you kind of add in a bit of fantasy into the equation by bringing in people that are not educated into the sport of boxing, where you could easily sign up to be a boxer. Like, I could go get my license today and boom, I'm a registered fighter. So now what I need to do is just go get myself a trainer and probably get myself a manager, which, I mean, you don't need a manager nor a promoter. You just need to get a team behind you, so that way you could be commissioned and sanctioned to fight in any state that you want, and then you can register on BoxRec for your whatchamacallit, for your I guess like your fighter profile, right? And then you could look at other fighters, and then if they have somebody to contact to make a fight with them, then you go make the fight. And see, like, honestly, that's what I hate about the sport of boxing. The sport of boxing is not like it's not like the NBA, or the UFC, where you could just select whoever you want to fight, but it's not like a centralized market structure where you have to fight these top guys to get to the top, because that's what the whole corruption behind sanctioning bodies are. Like, before you are even ranked, you could just pad up your record to be 20-0, 30-0, but then come to find out, when you look at how this fighter fights, he or she fights like crap because, number one, they haven't fought outside of their nation or wherever they're fighting from to be tested to the highest level of fighting styles that are more, difficult and uncomfortable to their liking. And that's where you get like the Canelo Alvarez's of the world and the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.'s of the world, where they really don't want to be fighting anybody but bums until they get tested for some big money. And then that's when things start to get really bad, because the problem with it is just that nobody doesn't want to get, their skills tested by somebody that could actually make them work in a fight. And then on top of that, they're giving them a lot of weaknesses and strengths in a fight where they could possibly be exposed or expose the other fighter. But how would anybody know if you're going to become a good fighter in the future when you're not fighting your greatest competition? See, now, with these social media stars getting into boxing and trying to fight each other, like Austin McBroom and KSI, fucking Logan Paul, Deji, all these guys that have really never been in a fight in their life, and just because that you fought other YouTube celebrity stars, in a celebrity, YouTube amateur boxing match, it still doesn't grant you the title that you are a boxer. You never fought somebody that has muscle memory in the sport that is giving you a tough test of your life. And that's really like my biggest issue in the sport of boxing. If you're going to register yourself freely to become a boxer, you should be restricted to be fighting guys that are actually in it to fight. And you shouldn't just be coming out of your way fighting somebody that doesn't have that much experience as much as you. And I mean, I'm not the one to be anti-free market on this, but if we're gonna be watching out for the safety of fighters, we have to think as like logical people. Like, why would you want to promote a fight if you're running a fight league or you're a promoter in boxing? Why would you want to have anybody show up to a fight? Which, I mean, don't get it twisted. Like, I mean, if it's two big, well-known social media stars that want to settle some business in a boxing ring, fine. But let's not try to go crazy here and say that these guys or these girls will be absolute pros, because that's up to them if they want to uplift their career to the pro level. And the problem with that is that when you make it to the pros is a lot different from the amateurs. See, look, I've only done boxing for, I want to say, at least, equivalent to 2 years, but I'm not the best fighter on earth, but I'm a southpaw, and my philosophy is that southpaws run boxing. And I look at all the greatest southpaws that the sport had to offer, and I emulate my style from that, because I know that I'm going to be off on something, and I like to improve on my skills and abilities to be that type of fighter. And I know I can, but the thing is that I'm never going to walk into a boxing ring and try to fight somebody, because why? I take the sport seriously. I don't take training not so seriously. I make sure that I get my work in, and I actually work on all the things that most pros usually do on a day-to-day basis. I work on tire flips. I work on footwork. I work on pretty much everything. I work on endurance training. I work on combinations. I work on, defensive methodology. I work on, using the speed bag, which I mean, I'm not so good at that yet, but once I do get good at that, I will evolve into a better, fighter per se. But either way, I mean, every time when I walk into the gym, I make sure that I am being safe with my drills, but I'm not pushing myself hard enough where I'm hurting myself, because I take safety really seriously, by running, any practice. But in a boxing fight, you have to be extremely on point in a fight because you're fighting someone that is trying to knock your head off. And sadly, that's where some fighters don't have self-control, and that's when you could end up getting, stopped or possibly brutally knocked out, or hence, suffer some massive injuries that could really hurt you in the long term. But moving forward, are social media stars good for the sport of boxing? And I would say no, because although you can have like a ASAP Rocky facing I don't know, a P Diddy in a boxing match, does not mean that ASAP Rocky and P Diddy are gonna come out safe in that fight. And I'm not the one to say that they can't fight each other, but don't expect it to be this type of match where everyone's going to be on equal terms, because there's going to be some form of corruption in a fight where a fighter's going to go a bit too overboard and try to be dirty to the other fighter, where let's just say that other fighter doesn't have that much boxing experience. Like, I'd be seeing guys like, especially with with some of these social media stars, when they're coming out of their way being Mr. Macho Man coming into a boxing fight. Like when I saw that, bare knuckle boxing fighting championship bout, or, like the boxing fights, I saw that Blueface guy versus that man, what the fuck is his name? His name is Hines, or, man, I forgot his name. Fuck, man. But basically, he went up against some guy. I forgot his name, but he was some white kid. And Blueface, he's this black celebrity, rapper or some shit. But he was beating the living crap out of this white guy, and I felt bad for him to get his ass whooped. But after the fight, like, some random fan came into the ring, and then he tried to intimidate Blueface to fight him, and I guess Blueface punched him in the face and threw some mean combinations at him. But after that, it pretty much was over. But I mean, if Blueface had actually hurt that white guy that he was fighting in that boxing match at the bare knuckle fighting event, they were on the undercard of Rachel Ostovich and Paige Van Zant. Blueface probably would have killed that white guy, because that white guy was taking a crap load of blows. He was getting punched. He was getting outboxed. And Blueface, I don't really look at him as like a real boxer, but just getting into boxing so quickly, develop into his first fight, just shows like that there's going to be situations like that where there's complete mismatches, and I don't think that's a good idea to have that in the sport of boxing. If you're gonna walk into your first fight, you need to have at least a good year's worth of training before you walk into a fight. Because, the thing is that I understand for some fighters that do like underground fighting or any form of fighting that's non-sanctioned or unlicensed fighting, that's fine. I mean, if you're that type of dude where you walk into the streets and you want to get into like underground paid fighting, that's all up to you. But the thing is that when you get into the pro game of boxing, you need to be responsibly gifted in your own manner to make sure that you protect yourself in and out that ring. Because boxing is still a very dirty game. Even though that people think that it's funny to see somebody get knocked out, it's not funny. Like, I don't want to see Hannah Montana and let's just say, who's that other chick? Amanda Bynes go at it at a boxing fight, and then, come to find out one of them gets brutally injured, from like a straight left hook, or, like a straight right. Even if they're wearing like headgear, you're still more likely to get injured with headgear on, versus without headgear in an actual fight. Because one, you have more, how should I say, there's more pressure, being applied towards your head with, with the equipment and sparring, or even in a real amateur fight. And even in a pro fight, I mean, it's still like the same thing, but it's just that you're getting more cumulative damage over time in a pro fight. And I mean, I guess it's not the same thing in amateur, because even in an amateur bout, you're still putting yourself at risk to get tagged, and then you could possibly hurt yourself a lot more. But it really differs between every fighter, because everyone's body's built different. So I guess like the main crux of this issue is that even if social media YouTubers or stars of any platform were to fight each other in the future, should these social media stars be separated from pro boxers and have their own, type of like event? And the answer would be yes. And there needs to be mega precaution with it. Whoever's going to sanction the bout, there needs to be actual organization in the fight itself to treat these guys like actual professional fighters. If you're going to come into the pro game, you're going to make sure that, everything is checked with your levels medically, medically and physically, or, medically and physically. And, once everything's cleared and you're ready to go, then everything should be set straightforward on fight night to make sure that, you're not coming out with any bullshit to say that you can't fight. Because, I mean, once you step inside those ropes, or once you step through those ropes inside the square circle, you need to make sure that you are ready to protect yourself at all times. And I mean, the problem with, the guys fighting is that some of these guys do have good power when they do fight each other. And the issue is just simply that when you do put yourself at risk, you are making yourself a bigger target to get hit in a fight. Because, one, when you're pressured in a boxing fight, you really don't know how to respond to certain blows. That's why in some of these boxing bouts, like, I'll just use the Deji versus, I'll use Jake Paul and Deji. Jake Paul was, he was clearly pounding on Deji. He was hurting him pretty bad. And Deji, he's not really too good of a defensively gifted fighter, where once he gets hurt, he doesn't hold, he doesn't really do anything smart. He kind of just goes at it with you still, and he gets himself banged up a lot in a fight. And it's not good, because, one, if that fighter that has no experience to deal with pressure in a ring while hurt does not recover in time, then that could lead to really serious injury, if not possible death. Because, you're putting yourself in a really bad position when you get banged up and you don't know what you're doing in a fight. And I think the trainers need to be reviewed too before a fight's even made. Because if you're going to be getting into your first pro fight, and granted, I'm not really trying to say anything to anyone, because I've never been in a pro boxing match before, but I'll just say it from like a fan's perspective, and I'd say from a human perspective, that if you're gonna get into any combat sport, you have to make sure that you are fully trained to the max. Because even if you've never fought a day in your life and you're gonna fight somebody that you barely know, and let's just say that person might have the upper advantage over you, because they might have some boxing training that they've gotten into, beforehand in the past, that might convert to fight night. It puts you at a disadvantage, and it's really bad to see somebody get pounded on and just think that's okay to see, because, that's what you signed up to do, blah, blah, blah. No. If you get into the ring, you have to be responsibly gifted to fight in the ring. I mean, it's kind of good enough that the guys are only doing it, because if it was going to the girls, that's a bit too risky to see the women just go at it with other girls and put themselves at risk. But good enough it's only the guys, because the guys themselves are really the ones that are putting themselves into danger. And the women are kind of just sitting there, just yip-yapping. They're not really, actually all about that action to try to fight somebody. And good enough that they do, because they mostly just talk on social media like clowns, and that's why women are the way they are, because they're really just not about that action. A lot of girls are not, because they're too, how should I say, they're too stuck in their feelings, and they focus so much on what someone says online to them rather than being a mature person about it and confronting those people in real life. But either way, it's good enough that we don't see a Charlie D'Amelio versus a Belle Delphine, which, I mean, that would be a funny fight to watch. But let's just be honest, we don't want to see that on PBC or Triller or DAZN. But I mean, if DAZN and Eddie Hearn is fine with that, and that's gonna bring a lot of people to watch a fight, would I say that's a good thing to do? For one, I would say no, but for two, if it sells and both girls are gonna probably fight maybe with an amateur style, setup where you have with the headgear on, and you probably limit it to like, six, 2 minute rounds or something like that, or like, I don't know. I mean, honestly, like, most women really don't fight a lot now these days, and probably never, because women are just not psychologically built to be fighting. Compared to be or compared to men. But even if they did, some girls are gonna have that mental capacity loss to not want to fight on a particular basis, similar to the pro level. But I mean, it's really up to the fighters. And either way, I say, as far as promotion goes for the sport of boxing, it really doesn't help the sport grow. It kind of just makes up the sport look like a circus. Yeah, like a circus jerk. And, it's not helping, let the fans understand, like, fighters of where they come from and how they got into the game. So, I just think, honestly, the sport of boxing is obviously, fading away. And sadly enough, there's a lot of problems, with the sport. But I mean, if these, let's just say, if these social media stars, were to, be those type of people to actually fight, full time and actually become fighters, then I would say yes. But as we can see, that is not to be the case. These social media stars really just don't fight at all. And it's pretty pathetic, because, I mean, if you're just going to come in to just get a quick payday, then you're really not helping yourself. You're kind of just hurting you're just hurting yourself to get beat up once and then, make a mockery out of the sport. So, I think that by itself just shows that the sport of boxing is like the only sport in the world where you can go into a sport with little to no experience, and you could basically put your life at risk and just basically become a laughing stock to other people that watch you fight. And I mean, not to say that other celebrities get into other sports like basketball, football, soccer, but I mean, those are not premier level sports where you see celebrities in actual events. I mean, the only two sports that I know where you ever really see celebrities, get into any event would be, basketball and boxing. And that's pretty much it. And I mean, that's another issue too. Because, I mean, in the sport of basketball, I mean, the NBA allows celebrities to come to their all-star events, and then you see Justin Bieber, you see some, like, little actors that are, like, well-known to the world that nobody really doesn't care about. And it's just really weird, because it's like no one doesn't know these people, and yet they still come to the all-star event games, because it's just like a night just to have fun. It's not really a night to, see let the best competition go at it, and then, you can understand like the true talent of NBA caliber. But that's why the NBA itself is, how should I say? It's organized in a certain way where you come to the games to see the best face the best by the end of the season. No one doesn't really care about the regular season. Everyone cares about, the whatchamacallit, the playoffs. So it would actually make a lot better sense to have the playoffs, by June, leading into the end of, I would say, I would say by the end of June. Or no, the playoffs start by end of May, leading into the end of June. But still, that's why the NBA is still, the way it is, because everyone knows that the best teams face each other every single year. But in the sport of boxing, you don't see that. You see a Logan Paul being on a undercard or being a main event to fight Anderson Silva, and yet people say, that's somehow appealing to the crowd itself, to say that people would still pay to see that fight. And that's not really good to promote the sport, because if these social media stars are just coming in to profit off of what the sport offers and not really become a real boxer, then how is that helping other fighters when those fighters are working hard to become the best at what they're trying to do to make it big in the sport of boxing? Because I guess what will happen into the future is that those same fighters that want to make it big are probably just going to fight a guy at a Jake Paul level. They'll just fight all these celebrity bums, and honestly, they really don't care, because they're gonna make so much money out of it. And I mean, no wonder why you see a guy like Jake Paul trying to call out Canelo Alvarez to fight him, knowing that Canelo, he's levels above Jake, but still Jake still wants that Canelo fight, because one, it sells, and two, he's Jake Paul and the other guy is Canelo Alvarez. So therefore everyone knows Jake Paul and everyone has bad blood against him, and rightfully so. It wouldn't make sense to see Jake Paul fight Canelo Alvarez coming down the line in the future. But even if Jake develops as a fighter, and let's just say from his next couple fights into the future, he actually wins and loses, would you ever give Jake Paul credit if he actually fights like an actual fighter? And I would say yes, but I'd say at the time being, no. He'll be fighting Tyron Woodley on Sunday, but still, it's like Jake Paul is really not helping the sport. Same thing with Logan Paul. The only fighters that I give respect that are actually giving, how should I say? The only people that I give respect to that are helping the sport are people that are actually dedicated to the sport of boxing, like a fitness trainer or anybody to the level of making the sport look good for, the sake of, being an actual full-time fighter. And that by itself really helps, the sport, because, it grants, motivation and influence to those that want to become a fighter in the future. So I give a lot of success, or I give a lot of respect to those fighters that are actually wanting to, fight the best to be the best. But as we can see with a guy like Logan and Jake Paul, they're fighting people that they know they can beat. And I mean, don't get it twisted. I mean, Jake Paul could get knocked out by Tyron Woodley, but it's a fight that would sell, because he's just in it to, to just get money out of it. Otherwise, he would have actually fought a real boxer that everyone would know that he probably could get stopped, or he could possibly win. And I mean, we've yet to see Jake go up against a real boxer. And I mean, the only reason why I'm gonna be watching Jake Paul, fight, is because I want to see if he's really about that life with boxing. But if he's not, he's not, because I knew from the beginning Jake Paul, he's not a real fighter. I know too many people that would stop him in less than 3 rounds that have way better caliber than he does, and yet he still calls himself, one of the fastest growing, boxing sensations, right? Knowing that he's not really doing anything good in the sport, like he's just training all these young little kids out of Puerto Rico, as if as if he's such a all-time great fighter. Like he's gonna become such a huge inspiration to those children. No, you're not. Those children are probably gonna laugh at you if you actually lose a fight, and it would be really funny to see that because one, you haven't faced a real fighter. But I mean, I would be surprised if Tyron Woodley knocks him out because, one, Tyron Woodley, he's not a boxer, but two, he knows how to punch. So, the odds are different, but, the thing is that when you get into the sport of boxing, you need to have two things. You need to have IQ and you need to have focus. Boxing is somewhat similar to wrestling. I would call it like a cousin in that regard. But when I used to wrestle in high school, I had two things on my mind. It was focusing on training and making sure you're ready, in your matches. Because one little mistake that you do, you could end up getting brutally hurt. And, the price I paid was ruining my left elbow in a wrestling tournament match, and sadly I wasn't able to compete for other matches because I broke my elbow. Like I had broken a centimeter of bone that was stuck inside the crease of my elbow, and that hurt me for quite a while, for 2 years, and then I had to get surgery on it. And I mean, I'm still able to wrestle, but it's like if that had gotten worse, that could have been a disease and I possibly could have died. So you don't play wrestling and you don't play boxing. But for these celebrities that get into the boxing game, you have to be really careful with your life. Because once you get hit, man, or get slammed onto, to like a mat, or get rushed into like an octagon cage with your face, that's going to torment your life forever. But that's pretty much what I have to say. Let me know what you guys think. This is Kieran Rodriguez signing out. Thank you. Bye.